Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time it is for you. Welcome back to the ultimate unsolved true crimes iceberg. We're still in this shit. We're still up in this bitch. That's right. It's still going. I did not give up on it. I did not die as much as I may have wanted to momentarily. We're still here. This is the second to last episode. This is the Lost Entries episode. Everything that I could not find during the main body of the iceberg is here now. We've got ourselves a nice little track list of the levels that I couldn't find stuff. I have been in contact with the creator of the iceberg. They were thankfully helpful enough to show me all of these lost cases that I could not find. So we get to talk about that today. So, buckle your fuckles. If you're new here, because a lot of new people click on these videos for whatever reason, there's an entire playlist featuring a shit ton of true crime if you want to start there. If you want to stick around for the ride now, you can. Links in the up there part for the playlist. Now let's go ahead and just get into this shit. Buckle your fuckles. Get comfy. Send your dad to the Shadow Realm. Whatever the hell you need. Let's just get this over with, baby! Disparus de Slayer. I don't speak Spanish or French, whatever language that one is, so hopefully I didn't butcher that too bad. Les Disparus de Slayer, literally the disappeared of the Slayer, is a collective name given to between 9 and 12 disappearances of children in the French department of Slayer between 1983 and 1996. Some children were murdered, one was attacked but survived, and others have never been found. Only 3 of the cases, which themselves consist of 2 separate, unrelated cases, have ever been solved. The victims are Philippe Pignot, age 13, disappeared the 25th of May in 1980. Ludovic Janvier, age 6, disappeared 17th of March 1983. Gregory Dubrul, age 7, disappeared 9th of July 1983. Now, he disappeared in Grenoble and was found alive the next day with head injuries at a landfill site. The other 2 were never found. Then, number 4, unnamed, unidentified, literally just bones, and they had been dead for at least several months and possibly 7 years. Found 23rd of May in the Vacours cave system. Anissa Oedi, is that how you say that? Sure. Age 5, disappeared 25th of June 1985 in Grenoble, found strangled and drowned in the Beauvoir Dam 13 days later. 13's a bad number, so that tracks. Shiraz Bendiol? What? Sure, we'll go... Listen, I don't mean to disrespect the dead, but what the fuck is that last name? Who permitted the French to do this? Age 10, disappeared the 8th of July 1987, and Bourgogne-Jalou, never found. Nathalie Boyer, age 15, disappeared 2nd of August 1988 in Villefontaine, found murdered in Saint-Quentin-Falavier. Fabrice Ladeau, age 12, disappeared 13th of January 1989 in Grenoble, found murdered 3 days later, sexually attacked and with a head wound in Quay-en-Chartreuse in the Chartreuse Mountains. Rakid Boisain, age 8, disappeared 3rd of August 1990 in the Écroles, found murdered the next day. A suspect was apprehended later that month, however. Sarah Siad, age 6, disappeared 16th of April in 1991 in Voreppe, found murdered. Leo Bailey, Bali, I'm butchering these names, I'm so sorry. Age 6, disappeared 19th of July 1996 on the Massif du Thiaia, never found. Saida Birch, age 10, disappeared 24th of November 1996 in Voreppe, found murdered. There's a common thread here. They're all dead. In the spring of 2008, the authorities created a unit called the Mineurs 38, Minors 38 being the French departmental code for the Slayer, comprising of several investigators charged with re-examining all of the cases. The solved cases are the murders of Rakid Boisain, which was solved shortly after the event. On 23rd of August 1990, a man who had taken part in the abduction was arrested and accused his brother, who had by then fled abroad, of instigating the crime. The former was found guilty of abduction and murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. He then died in prison. That's how life imprisonment tends to work. The murders of Sarah Siad, 91, and Saida Birch, 96, were solved thanks to DNA profiling. On 25th of July 2013, a man who had been 15 years old at the time of the first murder was investigated after traces of his DNA turned up at both of the different places the two bodies were found. The man's profile was on the FNAG, the French National DNA Database, due to having previously been arrested for driving under the influence and driving without insurance. Pro tip, if you're gonna drive under the influence, fucking don't. Just don't. Get an Uber. Walk. Driving under the... normally, I am very condoning of legal actions. DUI is not one I can condone. That shit kills people. Don't do that. Don't be fucking stupid. If you're watching this channel, I trust that you aren't stupid, so that's good. I trust you. But don't do stuff like that. Next entry. I'm gonna get off the soapbox now. River Park Rapist. Oh, yeah. Oh, nope. I can't even open this with an oh, yeah. Now, you might be confused on how Richard Alexander's Wikipedia article would lead me to River Park Rapist. We will get there. Richard Alexander is an Indiana man wrongfully convicted of rape and later exonerated by DNA evidence. On September 17th, 2020, he was charged with the murder of his ex-girlfriend. Damn, guess 2020 really was not his year. In 1996, a suspected serial rapist, dubbed by the local media the River Park Rapist, preyed on female residents of South Bend, Indiana. Police arrested Richard Alexander, then 30 years old, on August of 1996 for 4 of the rapes, largely on the basis of the statements of the victims. DNA evidence definitively excluded him as a suspect in one of the rapes, although both the victim and her fiancé continued to insist that Alexander was the perpetrator. That's right, he faked his DNA. Totally. Jesus Christ, that's stupid. Not all of the investigators were convinced of his guilt, particularly because 3 similar rapes occurred while Alexander was in custody. And, oh yeah, also, DNA evidence doesn't fucking lie. It's one of the only things the sham science known as forensic science has ever definitively brought about that is in any way useful. Polygraphs are bullshit. Fingerprints, the whole fingerprints are unique thing, that was made as a, offhanded comment by a fucking eugenicist in 1873. That's not scientifically backed. Handwriting? That might as well be astrology. You cannot profile someone by their handwriting. So, largely forensic science is completely bullshit, except for DNA evidence. You can't just be like, yeah, well, this, rape kinda leaves DNA. So you can't just look at the DNA, see it's not a match, and be like, still him. So yeah, it's really brilliant that, the police are only a little thinking that he is not the person, despite 3 more rapes happening while he's in custody and DNA evidence. Now, in the case of one of the rapes that took place while he was in custody, Alexander's picture was accidentally placed in a photo lineup to the victim. She selected his photograph as that of her assailant, despite his incarceration at the time of the offense. These people have not considered in the slightest that mayhaps there's a man who looks like Richard Alexander out there. No one thought of that? Nevertheless, Alexander was prosecuted for 3 of the rapes, because of course he was. The American justice system is fucking bullshit ran by chimpanzees. Actually, that's flattering to chimpanzees. They could probably do a better job. Now, he was prosecuted for 3 rapes, with charges totaling 2 counts of robbery, 2 counts of criminal deviant conduct, 2 counts of attempted rape confinement, attempted robbery, rape, burglary, and auto theft. His 1997 trial ended in a hung jury. I'm shocked. You're fucking kidding me. You're fucking kidding me. DNA evidence said he didn't do it, and the jury's hung. Brilliant. Now, the 9 white jurors were in favor of the conviction for the charges brought, and 2 of the 3 black jurors voting for conviction of lesser charges. He was retried for the crimes in 1998 by an all-white jury. Oh boy. At the second trial, one of the victims, though identifying Alexander as her assailant, asserted that he had a hairless chest without tattoos. When it was demonstrated that Alexander had a hairy, heavily tattooed chest, he was acquitted for that rape. Nevertheless, he was convicted of the other two and sentenced to 70 years in prison. In 2001, with Alexander having already served 5 years in prison, alleged burglar and child molester named Michael Murphy confessed to one of the two rapes of which Alexander had been convicted, knowing the details only the true assailant could know. With this revelation, a judge ordered a new round of DNA testing in Alexander's case. Hairs found at the scene of the rape were submitted to mitochondrial DNA testing. At the time of Alexander's original conviction, such testing was not available in the state of Indiana. This is because the Midwest and the South may as well be a third world fucking country. The tests proved that the DNA did not match Alexander's profile, but did match Murphy's. Because of this new development, Indiana prosecutors came to believe that Alexander was not responsible for the rapes. No fucking shit! No fucking shit, Indiana! In the remaining rape case, for which he was incarcerated, the evidence against him consisted of the victim's tentative identification of his voice and an eyewitness's visual identification of Alexander. The Indiana prosecutor and Alexander's defense attorney filed a joint motion to have Alexander's convictions overturned. The courts granted the motion, and Alexander was exonerated of all charges and released from prison December 12, 2001. It is now believed that the River Park rapist was actually two separate rapists. On June 4, 2002, Alexander filed a federal suit against the city of South Bend, its police department, 14 of its officers, including Sergeant Cindy Eastman, an officer instrumental in securing Alexander's release. His lawyer, Roseanne P. Yanovich, said she expected to ask for about $55 million in damages, $10 million for every year spent in prison. Among the allegations in the 48-page lawsuit, police showed photos of Alexander the rape victims, who said they had not seen enough of their attackers' faces for positive identification. Police coerced or constructed the identifications of Alexander that were used as his trial, and police destroyed evidence and ignored Alexander's alibi. Cops being pig-headed fucking idiots as usual. I haven't gotten into this yet, but it takes more time to be a barber than a police officer? That's right. It takes more time to go to fucking haircutting school than to be a cop. Because being a barber is a heavily dangerous job where you are armed in public and expected to not only know the law, but uphold it and keep everyone safe. Definitely. God, cops. Real brilliant group there. The civil rights lawsuit was eventually dismissed by the United States District Court, a decision which Alexander appealed. But on January 3, 2006, a Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit upheld the District Court's dismissal of Alexander's lawsuit. The court stated that Alexander had not proven his rights were violated during the trial, which yielded his wrongful conviction. Which I think is a prime example of how law does not appeal to morality in any sense. On May 22, 2007, Alexander pleaded guilty to one count of battery for having beaten a former girlfriend with a lead pipe in 2005, and as part of his plea bargain, the second count of battery was dismissed. On June 14, 2007, Alexander was sentenced to 8 years in prison with 2 years suspended, and on September 17, 2020, the last of his subsequent legal troubles, he was charged in the stabbing death of his ex-girlfriend following a pattern of domestic violence. Fuck. Christ. And for whatever reason, after that bombshell of a horrific revelation, there's fucking trivia. Thanks, Wikipedia. I love trivia. The Tegan Incident. The Tegan Incident takes us to one Mr. Sadamichi Hirasawa's Wikipedia page. Sadamichi Hirasawa was a Japanese tempera painter who was born on February 18, 1892, and died May 10, 1987. He was convicted of mass poisoning and sentenced to death, though he is believed to have been falsely charged. Due to strong suspicions that he was innocent, I know how to speak, no justice minister has ever signed his death warrant. The Tegan case itself, the meat and tendies of this case, begins on January 26, 1948. A man calling himself an epidemiologist arrived in a branch of the Imperial Bank Teikoku Ginko, aka Teigen, in Shinamachi, a suburb of Toshima, Tokyo, before closing time. He explained he was a public health official sent by U.S. occupation authorities who had orders to inoculate the staff against a sudden outbreak of dysentery. He gave all 16 people present a pill and a few drops of liquid. Those present drank the liquid he gave, which was later thought to be a nitrile hydranocyanide, an assassination toxicant originally developed in the Noborito laboratory. When all were incapacitated, the robber took some money lying in desks, which amounted to 160 yen, $2,000 US at the time, but left the majority behind, leaving his motive unknown. 10 of the victims died at the scene, 1 was a child of an employee, and 2 others died while hospitalized. Never understood why Japan did not just move the comma to the left one, or maybe 2, when explaining their money, because 160,000 yen is such an absurd amount compared to US dollars. Why not just make it like 16,000 yen, or 1,600 yen? You know, just up your decimals, really. Bounce that over a few. Anyway, the arrest and trial. Hirasawa was caught by the police due to Japanese habit of exchanging business cards with personal details. There had been 2 other extremely similar cases of attempted and actual theft at banks via the use of poison in the weeks and months before the robbery. In all cases, the poisoner, a lone male, left a business card. The poisoner used a card which was marked Jiro Yamaguchi. In one of the 2 incidents, it was later found that said Yamaguchi did not exist. The card was a fake. The poisoner also used a real card which was marked Shigeru Matsui of the Ministry of Health, Welfare, and Department of Disease Prevention. In another of the 2 incidents, the original card owner was found to have an alibi, and Matsui told the police that he had exchanged cards with 593 people. But of these, 100 were the type used in the poisoning incidents, of which 8 remained in his possession. Matsui recorded the time and place of the business card exchange on the back of cards he receives, so the police set out to trace the remaining 92 cards. 62 cards were retrieved and their receivers cleared. A further 22 were deemed to have been irrelevant to the case. Of the remaining 8 cards, 1 was received by Hirasawa. The police were led to arrest Hirasawa because, 1, he could not produce a card he had received from Matsui. Hirasawa claimed to have lost the business card together with his wallet due to having been a victim of pickpocketing. 2. A similar amount of money that had been stolen from the bank was found in Hirasawa's possession, the origin of which he refused to divulge. The origin of the money is unknown to this day, though some, such as crime fiction novelist Seicho Matsumoto, suggest Hirasawa received it by drawing pornographic pictures, a side business that would have been detrimental to Hirasawa's reputation as an artist. 3. Hirasawa's alibi of having been taking a stroll in the vicinity of the crime scene could neither be verified nor substantiated. 4. Hirasawa was identified as a poisoner by several witnesses, but only by 2 survivors, and see picture below. 5. He confessed to having been involved in 4 previous cases of bank fraud, recanted together with a subsequent confession. He was arrested in August 21st, 1948, after police interrogation, which allegedly involved torture, because that's how we do justice. Hirasawa confessed, and then recanted soon after, because, you know, if you're beating the shit out of someone, of course they're going to say whatever you want them to say to get them to stop. His later defense against his confession was based on partial insanity, alleging that he had been troubled with Korsakoff syndrome. What? What is that? Come on, Wikipedia, give me the little pop-up, bro. Alright, I guess it's not in the mood to give me the pop-up today. Anyway, as a result of rabies inoculation, and so his confession was not reliable. The court, however, disagreed, and Hirasawa was sentenced to death in 1950. Until 1949, a confession was solid evidence under Japanese law, even if the police tortured a person to extract said confession. The Supreme Court of Japan upheld the death sentence in 1955. His attorneys tried to have the sentence revoked, submitting 18 pleas for retrial over the following years. He was sentenced to death, but there was no originally conclusive evidence. In addition, although 40 employees saw the crimes, there were only 2 people who identified him as a criminal. Seicho Matsumoto presumed that the true culprit was a former member of Unit 731 in his books A Story of the Teikoku Bank Incident in 1959 and The Black Fog of Japan in 1960. Matsumoto also suspected that the money of unknown origin came from selling pornographic drawings. Believe it or not, porn is a major side business for most artists. If I wanted to make money without, if I wanted to make money fast, I could write porn, and people would gobble that shit up. But you know what's more profitable than writing porn? Drawing it. Most artists, well, not most, but a solid chunk of artists probably make a significant amount of their income from drawing some IT dude's furry OC getting absolutely fucking railed by a horse. Now, I personally want to keep my hands out of porn for now, so you can go ahead and just subscribe to my Patreon if you're interested in that. The link is somewhere. I don't know where the link is yet. It's probably in the description. Anyway, that's me shamelessly self-advertising done. Let's get to the next thing. Now, Kei Kumai protested Hirasawa's conviction in his film Teigen Jiken Shikasu, Teijin Incident, Condemned, The Long Death in English, in 1964. The successive ministers of Japan did not sign his death warrant, so the death sentence was never carried out. Even Isaji Tanaka, who on 13th of October 1967 announced in front of the press that he had signed the death warrants of 23 prisoners in one go, did not sign Hirasawa's death warrant, stating he doubted Hirasawa's guilt. The poison was regarded as readily obtainable potassium cyanide in Hirasawa's trial. One of the reasons to give doubt to Hirasawa's guilt is because the victim's symptoms were very clearly different from potassium cyanide poisoning, which is rapid, which also supports the Unit 731 member, because that is a heavily advanced poison to just get your fucking hands on if you're a regular-ass dude. Keio University's contemporary investigation claimed that the true poison may have been acetone cyanohydrin, a military poison deliberately designed to be slow-acting, which Hirasawa could have never obtained. Hirasawa remained in prison as a condemned criminal for the next 32 years, and he spent his time painting and writing his autobiography, My Will, the Teikoku Bank Case. In 1981, Makoto Endo became the leader of Hirasawa's lawyers. Besides the case, he took part in controversial trials such as that of Norio Nagayama, which I have no clue what that is. Maybe it's a topic for a different video. I don't know. Ooh, Japanese spree killer and novelist. Interesting. The defense claimed that statute of limitations for his death penalty ran out in 1985. The death penalty has a 30-year statute of limitations under the Criminal Code of Japan, and so Endo appealed for his release. However, the Japanese court refused this argument, pointing out that the statute only applies in the case of a death row inmate escapes from prison and evades capture for 30 years. Japanese courts judged that the punishment begins when the minister signs a death warrant, which had never been done. His health deteriorated in 1987, so on April 30th, 1987, Amnesty International petitioned the Japanese government to release him. But, sadly, Hirasawa died in prison of pneumonia on May 10th. There were, of course, bids for a posthumous mid-trial, or retrial, and some references in pop culture, but that does not in any way fix the fact that the Japanese government just let some guy die in prison for something he very clearly did not commit. Wow, I really love the justice systems around the world and how fucking ineffective they all are. The New Orleans serial killer, aka the Storyville Slayer. This sounds like some shit out of a movie. The Storyville Slayer is a nickname given to an American serial killer who murdered at least 24 prostitutes and drug addicts, most of whom were women, in New Orleans, Louisiana. Through the course of the investigation, two separate suspects were considered, one of whom was convicted of one murder, leading investigators to believe that multiple killers are responsible, but let's get into this shit. Modus operandi, the fun part. The perpetrator, or perpetrators, mainly targeted girls and women of African American descent, aged between 17 and 42 as victims. Most of them were strangled to death, so that's a little personal, while a number of others were beaten and drowned in canals and rivers, and then dumped in swamps. Fucking A. They were also dumped in rivers, canals, and near highways bordering the western shores of Lake Pontchartrain. Due to the isolated locations of the dumping sites, the victims' bodies were left in water spanning from several weeks to several years, resulting in extreme decomposition and destruction of incriminating evidence. Some of the victims have never even been identified. According to investigators, the crimes began in the summer of 1991. A young black woman informed police about an attempt on her life. According to her testimony, she had boarded the car of an unknown man in Algiers sometime in July, and after having had a conversation with him, the man strangled her into unconsciousness and dropped her off in the streets. Her name has never been disclosed, and she is referred to as Brenda in this case. During her testimony, Brenda gave a description of her attacker, which from an identikit was created. She described him as muscular, well-dressed, middle-aged, and black. That sounds... yep, we'll go with that. Middle-aged black man who drove a dark-colored vehicle, possibly a Buick Regal or a Chevrolet Monte Carlo. You, Chevy. On August 4th, 1991, the body of 17-year-old Danielle Britton was found in a ditch not far from where Brenda had been abducted. Her body had been covered with garbage, and an autopsy determined that she had been beaten and strangled. Britton had dropped out of school shortly before her death and was last seen in New Orleans at a bar next to an unknown man. It's unclear whether she was employed, but nothing indicated she engaged in prostitution or used drugs. On September 3rd, the body of 21-year-old Tira Tassin was found. A mother of three, she had a criminal record for drug possession. 18 days later, the body of 28-year-old Charlene Price was found in a New Orleans park, just 1 mile from where Britton was found. An autopsy determined she had been beaten and then strangled. Price was a drug addict, but had no history of prostitution. On November 21st, the body of 37-year-old Regina Oka was discovered. A mother of three, she had multiple arrests for prostitution during her lifetime. An autopsy deduced that she had been strangled and prior to her death had taken a large dose of cocaine, which could have caused an overdose. Yeah, definitely. Was it strangling or the cocaine in her system that killed her? Definitely not the strangling. Some dipshit police officer, probably. On December 14th, skeletal remains were found in a ditch near a highway. The autopsy established remains belonging to a young black girl who at the time was in her early 20s and approximately 157 centimeters tall. Despite having a defining characteristic, namely strongly protruding front teeth, she was not identified, and the victim is referred to as Jane Doe No. 1, and was presumably strangled and found not far from Britton's body. On January 4th, 1992, the body of 28-year-old Lydia Madison, who had several arrests on charges of prostitution and drug possession, was found in a ditch under a highway overpass. The cause of her death was also declared as strangulation. On June 2nd, 25-year-old George Williams' body was found in the La Branche wetlands area of St. Charles Parish. An autopsy determined that she had been strangled. Investigators determined that she was a transsexual. You just mean trans, right? Interesting word choice there. Wikipedia, just go with transgender. That works. She had feminine features and worked as an exotic dancer at a New Orleans nightclub. Unlike previous victims, Williams was a drug addict, and she had been arrested for prostitution. Oh, robbery. My bad. Not prostitution. Robbery and drug possession. On July 25th, the body of 33-year-old Noah Filson was found in the waters of the canal near I-55. Like Williams, Filson was transgender. I don't like how they keep throwing around that word transsexual. The fuck is this, 1970? And worked at a nightclub under the name Brenda Bewitch. So we'll call her Brenda from now. Not to be confused with Brenda from earlier. On September 21st, the remains of 29-year-old Regina Martin were discovered in the waters of another canal near a highway. She was an impoverished mother of three who engaged in prostitution and had several arrests. On February 20th, 1993, the skeletal remains of 30-year-old Cheryl Lewis were discovered in the waters of a canal near Hanville. Like the previous victims, Lewis was an impoverished mother and known prostitute with several arrests, and she had been strangled to death, alongside people that she knew who were also prostitutes. However, while investigating her death, authorities learned she was last seen alive on February 2nd, getting into the car of an unidentified white man. On the next day, the body of 42-year-old Dolores Mack was found in the waters of a canal near a highway not far from the Lewis crime scene. She too had been strangled, but had no known history with either drugs or prostitution. During this period, according to investigators, the killers committed several other murders, but due to various circumstances, the bodies of the victims were found only in early '94. On February 4th, 1994, the skeletal remains were found in St. John the Baptist Parish, later determined to be a young woman between the ages 25 and 35. She had been strangled. She remains unidentified and is referred to in this case as Jane Doe number 2. 5 days later, more skeletal remains were found, because, oh boy, we love finding bones, totally. This time, the girl's age was estimated to be around 15 to 17. Due to extreme decomposition, she remains unidentified and is Jane Doe number 3. On February 13th, 25-year-old Stephanie Murray's body was found in a small pond near the Bonnet-Carré spillway. 2 days later, the skeletal remains of another young girl were found, whose identity was never ascertained. Jane Doe 4. Jesus Christ, that's grim. On April 2nd, 2 sets of skeletal remains were found in the canals, later determined to be of a young woman and a young man. Due to extreme decomposition, neither could be identified, and they are referred to as Jane Doe number 5 and John Doe number 1. On July 3rd, the body of 32-year-old Michelle Foster is found. She had gone missing in New Orleans just days prior. On October 19th, the skeletal remains of another woman were found in a wooded area near a highway within the limits of Bridge City. She was later identified as 28-year-old Stephanie Brown, who had no prior criminal record, because, criminal record is so important when investigating a murder case. Jesus Christ. On January 22nd, 1994, the body of 29-year-old impoverished mother of 3, Wanda Ford, was found in a swamp near the I-55. During her lifetime, she had been arrested multiple times for theft and was a known drug addict. On the following day, the body of 39-year-old Sandra Warner was found in St. John the Baptist Parish. On January 25th, the remains of 25-year-old Henry Calvin, who had gone missing months earlier from New Orleans, were also found. On March 24th, police found more skeletal remains under an overpass in the Teikoku parish. While the remains were determined to be female, authorities were unable to identify her, so now we've got Jane Doe number 6. Her estimated age was between 25 and 35. On April 30th, the bodies of 2 women were found in a swampy area near the I-55. The victims were later identified as Karen Ivester and Sharon Robinson, 30 and 28 respectively. Autopsies determined that Ivester had been strangled while Robinson had been beaten and strangled, but the presence of water in her lungs indicated the cause of death had been drowning. On May 6th, the body of 39-year-old Sandra Williams, who had been strangled, was found in a boulevard in New Orleans. According to the official investigation, the murders ceased following her death. 11 months after the final body was found, police discovered additional skeletal remains on April 8th, 1996. But these skeletal remains were later identified as 39-year-old Lola Porter, who had gone missing from New Orleans all the way back in 1992. Policemen later interviewed her friends and acquaintances who stated she had been cohabitating with a white man who vanished shortly after Porter went missing. In May 1995, a task force was established by the New Orleans Police Department in conjunction with surrounding parishes and the FBI in order to solve the killings. During a press conference in August, Chief Richard Pennington announced to the media that the current prime suspect was 33-year-old Victor Grant, a police officer working in New Orleans. Ooh, one of their own. Fun. During the investigations, it was established that Gant had an intimate relationship with one of the victims, Sharon Robinson. As a young man, he was a boxer and regularly went to the gym and did weightlifting, and did closely match a 1991 suspect sketch based on Brenda's testimony. FBI agent Neil Gallagher later clarified that Gant was a suspect only in Robinson and Ivester's murders, and at the present they had no evidence tying him to any of the other killings. In response, Gant's attorney, John Reed, said his client was innocent and that the evidence was purely circumstantial. Believe it or fucking not, most evidence in a lot of these cases I've talked about are purely circumstantial, and somehow the judges run with it anyways. Now, about Victor Gant. As a native of New Orleans, Gant spent his childhood and youth in Algiers, where a number of the victims lived and were abducted from. He became a police officer in February of 1980, and while on patrol, Gant would spend a lot of time in red light districts, where years later he acquired many acquaintances among pimps, prostitutes, and street informants. In the early 90s, Gant gained a reputation for being corrupt.
Oh no, what a shocker!
after a number of informants reported that he, along with a few others, were running racketeering operations against pimps and other criminals. It was revealed that during this time he met Sharon Robinson, who soon became his roommate. On December 9, 1994, Robinson went to the police and reported him for beating her, and according to her statement, Gant had punched her in the face and broke her nose. Gant denied the accusation, stated that he had pushed her during an argument, with Robinson hitting her nose on a chair. Likely. Very likely. Totally. I believe that. You can really hear how much I believe that in my voice. This was, of course, contradicted by all of her crotch goblins, children, who said that they had witnessed him beating their mom. This was also backed up by the emergency room doctor, who testified the woman's injuries were definitely a result of having the shit beaten out of you. In early 1995, a disciplinary panel and hearing to determine Gant's punishment began. During the hearing, members of the disciplinary committee reviewed the testimony of the prosecution witnesses. The key witnesses was supposed to be Robinson, but she was conveniently found dead. Wow. According to the investigators, Gant had killed her both and her friend Karen Ivester in order to get rid of them. According to the friends and acquaintances of the victims, Gant held a personal grudge against Ivester and had spoken negatively of her on multiple occasions. In order to determine whether he was guilty or not, Gant was ordered to submit DNA for testing to see whether or not they could match it to the perpetrator's saliva. Why would that be there? Oh, it was found on a piece of chewing tobacco near Ivester's body. I was about to be very concerned. The results were inconclusive and no charges were filed against Gant, who was dismissed from the force in August of '96. On August 13, 1997, the Howard Stern Show received a call from a man who identified himself as Clay. Oh my god, is that a Dream reference? Holy shit, Dream is a serial killer! Okay, now that unfunny joke is done. During the conversation with host Howard Stern, which was live, Clay described details for more than 12 murders and gave some details about his background, indicating that he was a white resident of New Orleans. The interview with potential serial killer caused a massive media publicity, thanks to which FBI agents allegedly went to the studio and seized audio recordings of the call to establish the caller's location and possible identity. In the following years, the credibility of this incident was questioned as the program received numerous calls regularly from people who claimed they had done terrible things, with some alleging that Stern himself faked the call to boost ratings, cause that's what TV's all about, baby, the fucking ratings. Line goes up forever. Now, however, a representative from the FBI stated that the man's confessions were credible as he had described details not known to the public at that time. Ooh, fun. In addition to Gant, another resident of New Orleans, Russell Elwood soon came under police suspicion. A native of Massillon, Ohio. He lived in Ohio. Elwood moved to New Orleans in 1968 after graduating from high school. For the next 30 years, Elwood lived in squalor because of his drug addiction, had no permanent residence, never married, and changed professions, often mostly sticking to photography and cab driving. Owing to his addiction, which we do not find what substance he's addicted to, Elwood was arrested several times from 1968 to 1998. While not imprisoned, he spent most of his time among fellow vagrants, with acquaintances describing him as an outsider who constantly sought to make get-rich-quick schemes, which consistently failed, because, believe it or not, there is literally no way to get rich quick besides be born by some dude who busted a nut and also happened to have a few $1 billion in the bank. Elwood first came under police scrutiny in 1994 after alleging he was found masturbating in his car by police. Interesting. This car had been parked by the road near where Cheryl Lewis and Dolores Mack's bodies were found. A partially undressed Elwood was forced out of his car and told to show his driver's license. What the fuck was running through that cop's head? My god, he's pulling his cock out! Make that man get his license! I don't understand, police. His explanation for stopping was to apparently change the oil and, let loose a little fluid from himself, too, and to repair the brake pads of his car. Well, he definitely wanted to repair something, and willingly allowed his vehicle to be searched. Officers found none of the items required for the fixes, not even a flashlight, which would be necessary to perform such repairs in a unit area at night. Elwood was questioned regarding the murders, and later booked as a suspect. After the task force was formed, Colonel Walter T. Gorman of the Jefferson's Parish Sheriff's Office and other task force members traveled to Sebring, Florida on July 23, 1997, so they could question Elwood, who was living with his elderly father. Once located, Elwood was informed of his rights and within 3 days gave several statements recorded on tape. During the interrogations, he admitted to frequenting black prostitutes throughout his life, claiming that he knew more than 100 girls, in addition to frequently taking drugs such as heroin, crack cocaine, and LSD over the years. Oh no, the CIA accidentally ruined another man's life.
Who would have ever seen this coming?
The investigators became increasingly suspicious when Elwood started speaking about having a dream in which he was being questioned about a series of murders and later admitting to frequenting the locations where the bodies were found, but continued to reaffirm his innocence. No, officer, please understand. I am a heroin junkie and consistently fuck prostitutes, but I am not a murderer. Actually, you know what? I can understand that statement. I made that jokingly, but that's a realistic outcome of this case. Anyway, on August 4th, 1997, just days after the interrogations were completed, Elwood was arrested for buying cocaine from an undercover police officer at his home in Sebring. Why the fuck do the cops get to have cocaine? That's bullshit. As a result, he was convicted and sentenced to spend 85 days in the county jail. Oh no, that man's never gonna do cocaine again because of that. Definitely. According to his cellmates, Elwood implicated himself as a prostitute's killings back in New Orleans and its various suburbs. One of them, Stan Hill, contacted the county's prosecutor's office and claimed that Elwood had described to him in detail how he had driven the women to outlying areas of the city, offering them large quantities of drugs that caused overdoses, then strangled and dumped their bodies.
Certainly interesting.
What the fuck? What the fuck is this? That is not funny. That is not, there's nothing.
A number of other inmates witnessed a fight between Elwood and another inmate, during which he allegedly said, "Yeah, I killed that
Racial slur.
bitch, and I'll kill you too." That's definitely a smart thing to say in prison. God, what a piece of shit. Another inmate, Stephen Michael Busser, and if you want me to pronounce it Stephen, you should have spelt it with a fucking V. I will pronounce it Stephen! It's spelt that way! Also told police that Elwood had boasted of being wanted for more than 60 murders within the state of Louisiana, and he even described to him in detail one of the murders. After his release, Elwood, who I'm starting to really think was the murderer, returned to being Canton to live with his brother, who offered him a high-paying job. What was it, killing prostitutes? He seems to have experience with that. Based on Hill's testimony, the task force tracked him down and re-interviewed him in the presence of Ron Camden, a 27-year-old veteran of the Cincinnati Police Department's homicide unit. During interrogation, Elwood initially denied making any such statements to the inmates, but after an audio tape of Hill's testimony was played, he admitted that he had indeed boasted to Hill. Camden later testified that Elwood also confessed to him that he had killed a black girl whose corpse he dumped in the canal. That seems to be a regular pastime of men in New Orleans. No recording of this confession was taken, and Elwood later denied ever confessing it to such a murder to Camden. Elwood later claimed that a mental illness had caused him to boast. No, please understand. It was my anxiety. That's a bullshit fucking claim, and everyone knows it. Demanding that the interrogation cease and he be allowed to return to New Orleans to see his attorney and be provided with treatment, aka killing more prostitutes and some more heroin, because this guy's clearly a piece of shit, this request was denied, whereupon Elwood confessed to killing Lewis and Mack but refused to be audio taped, and soon after began denying that he had confessed. This is very he said, she said. Eventually, Elwood was released again, and in January of 1988, he returned to New Orleans. On January 16th, he was stopped by traffic cops for speeding, and was scheduled to appear in court, but failed to appear on time and was subsequently arrested for contempt of court. Elwood was eventually convicted and ordered to spend 120 days behind bars, because that's really going to fix things. While incarcerated, authorities charged him with the murders of Lewis and Mack on March 4th, 1998. The trial began June 8, 1999 in Lafayette. During the proceedings, a number of Elwood's former cellmates and prostitutes testified as prosecution witnesses, with the former claiming that he had confessed to the killings, and the latter claimed that he had assaulted them. Diane Gilliam, a former prostitute, told the court she had known Elwood since the early 1990s and had dated him periodically. She testified that in 1992, during a date, Elwood, while under the influence of drugs, assaulted, beat, and strangled her into unconsciousness. Gilliam stated that she woke up to find herself in a pool of blood in an unfamiliar wooded area, where a passing-by motorist found her by chance and sheltered her at the motel where he was staying at. She said she did not report the incident due to being a prostitute with a criminal record because police departments are really fair towards prostitutes. Another girl, Navassa Richmond, a former stripper and prostitute, turned and testified that she had also been beaten and assaulted twice by a drug-crazed Elwood. This guy is like Captain America, except instead of being strong, he just beats the shit out of prostitutes. What the fuck? During this assault, he also attempted to strangle her. Janie Stokes, a former prostitute, told the court that she first met him in either 1992 or 1993 at a Shell gas station in Marrero, where he, not she, was working as a cab driver. Stokes stated that Elwood bought her lunch and treated her nicely before driving her to his home. There, he suggested they use cocaine, and after doing that, after, a nice lunch and nice cocaine, Elwood beats the fuck out of her, but she manages to flee. I don't understand why someone would be doing this in 1992 when you could be getting your hands on an R32 GTR Skyline. Now, the witness, like Gilliam, did not report the incident because she was a drug addict, and as we know, the police really love drug addicts. Antoinette Rainey, who worked as a drug dealer in New Orleans, also appeared as a witness for prosecution, testifying that Elwood was a regular customer. She recounted an incident in which Elwood forced her into his car at gunpoint, then drove her to an underpass where he beat, raped, and robbed her, threatening to kill her through the entire ordeal. Rainey was able to escape, but did not report the attack because, how do you go to the police and say, "Officer, please help me. This man has stolen $10,000 worth of crack cocaine." The first question is not going to be, well, where is this guy? Sorry about your stuff. It's going to be, why did you have $10,000 of crack cocaine? Because a war on drugs is a thing, and it's really stupid, and time and time again, drugs win the war on drugs, over and over again. Now, of course, 3 witnesses testified that they had seen the defendant with Cheryl Lewis shortly before her disappearance. According to the testimony of Denise Sanders, who was Lewis's best friend, she had seen her in a cab with Elwood 3 days prior. Isn't that interesting? No, she identified Elwood as a driver. Wineware Henry, Lewis's cousin, stated that she last saw her at a hotel in Avondale with a man whom she identified as Elwood. According to her, Lewis had told Henry that she and Elwood were on their way to the suburb of New Orleans, where her body was later found. Henry testified that she had not given the police this information, as she was wanted for petty offenses at the time. Elwood himself denied knowing any of the victims or committing any of the murders, because of course he would, and conveniently he couldn't provide an alibi. Cheryl Lewis's mother in turn admitted that her daughter was a drug addict and prostitute, which I don't understand how the fuck that affects the case in any matter. But she said that she had never seen Elwood with her daughter before, probably because he killed her when he saw her. His attorneys argued that Elwood was not in New Orleans at the time of the murders, claiming that he had been in Ohio with some relatives. Elwood was known for keeping extensive amounts of documents to indicate his whereabouts, but the receipts regarding his supposed presence in Ohio for February 1993 had mysteriously disappeared. It's almost like that's bullshit. Elwood's attorneys then filed a motion for a polygraph test, which is really fucking stupid because that is pseudoscience bullshit, to be performed on Sue Rushing, then head of the task force, which was granted. During the test, Rushing was unable to answer a series of questions regarding the missing receipts, but the result was inconclusive, casting doubt on Elwood's guilt. Ultimately, the murder charge for Dolores Mack was dropped, but on the basis of very circumstantial evidence and unreliable testimony, Elwood was found guilty of killing Cheryl Lewis and was sentenced to life imprisonment. Now, the way that the article words this, circumstantial evidence and unreliable testimony, almost makes it sound like the author of this article was under the belief that Elwood should not have been arrested. To me, this seems pretty fucking clear. If you confess to murders, give extensive details, and then brag about killing someone during a fight, you might be a murderer. I think it's pretty open and shut. They just couldn't find the evidence. Now, Elwood was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole on August 17, 1999. A deputy who worked in the department later attempted to sue them for allegedly firing him for revealing that rushing had destroyed crucial evidence, but his appeal was rejected due to lack of evidence. Isn't that fucking ironic? As of November 2021, all the murders, aside from that of Cheryl Lewis, remain unsolved. Elwood remains a suspect in several of the killings, but no charges have been filed against him. Gant left New Orleans after his discharge from law enforcement and moved to Atlanta, Georgia, where he presumably still lives today and continues to be a piece of shit. In a 2016 interview with HuffPost, Major C.J. Dester of the St. John the Baptist Parish Sheriff's Office confirmed that Gant is still on the suspect list. Oh boy, that was a fucking mouthful and a half. That was like a porn star's dick. Way too big. Let's go to the next one. Bricka Family Murders. Oh boy. I really love the you have 2 free member-only stories left for this month. Sign up for Medium. How about you sign up for sucking my fucking dick? I'd rather get shot in the leg than subscribe to your shitty-ass magazine. I hate when magazine ads do that. Now that that's my little bit of excessive hatred, hopefully I don't need to pull out the lingerie ad counter. Let's go ahead and get into this. The year is 1996. Gerald Jerry Bricka married Linda Bula in Seattle, Washington in 1961. Linda was born in Barrington Hills, Illinois. Or, to really piss off the people who live in Illinois. She and her family later relocated to Seattle, where she met Jerry and briefly worked as a flight attendant. On June 6, 1962, Linda gave birth to the couple's only child, Deborah Ann Bricka. After their daughter's birth, the Brickas relocated to Cincinnati, Ohio, and moved into a tri-level home at 3381 Greenway Avenue in the Bridgetown neighborhood in 1963. Jerry, 28, was a hard-working chemical engineer in Monsanto. Oh god, not the corn company. Cohen often worked nights, weekends, and holidays. Linda stayed home for a few years after Debbie's birth. In 1996, Linda, at age 23, decided to go back to work and took a temporary part-time job with local veterinarian Dr. Fred Leininger at his Glenway Animal Hospital. The Brickas were well liked by their neighbors and often had get-togethers for backyard barbecues and holiday parties. There's no doubt the Brickas were living the American dream before the American dream was twisted and corrupted into being in debt your entire fucking life, owning nothing, and dying a work slave. But someone shattered that dream in a moment of violence, the same way that future generations would have it shattered. Yeehaw. On Tuesday, September 27th, 1966, neighbors of the Brickas started noticing odd things at the Bricka home. Jerry hadn't brought in the trash cans from the curb, for one. And we all know how American homeowners associations are. If your grass is too fucking long, they're gonna fine you, because they're assholes who deserve to have their houses burnt down. So the trash cans was probably a huge deal. Or maybe they were lucky and didn't have a dictator-like homeowners association. The next-door neighbor, Richard Mayer, threw a local newspaper on the front porch, but no one retrieved it. The couple's 2 vehicles sat in the driveway and on the street in front of the home, unmoved for 2 days. The Mayers tried calling the Brickas. No one answered. Richard Mayer walked over to their home and noticed the front door ajar. At around 10:40 p.m., Mayer told another neighbor, Richard Jansen of 3374 Greenway Avenue, about the door, and the two decided to go into the house. Jansen, a World War II veteran, recognized the smell as soon as he fully opened the door. He had smelt rotting flesh numerous times during his time in the war, and fear struck him like a bolt of lightning. The men walked through the main level of the home and upstairs to the bedrooms. Jansen and Mayer discovered the bodies of Jerry and Linda Bricka on the floor of their bedroom. Jerry was face down on the floor between the wall and the bed. Linda's body was face up and across her husband's body. Bricka's daughter Debbie was found on her bedroom floor, dead. Horrified at their discovery, Jansen and Mayer ran to call the police. Soon after, authorities arrived at the crime scene to begin the investigation of the grisly murders. Both the front and back doors of the home were closed but unlocked. There was no sign of forced entry or struggle. Police found a load of clothes in the dryer located in the utility room next to the living room. The clothes were still damp. It appeared that Linda had folded clothes recently because some were sitting on the couch. The family's 2 dogs, Thumper and Dusty, were locked in a rear room unharmed. The SPCA later took charge of them. A 6.5-inch knife from an Indian carving set made of teak wood and steel was missing. An inscription, Rajbabros, India, was on the fork blade and may have been on the knife the police never found. Its mate was on top of the buffet in its sheath, and there was no indication someone had ransacked the buffet. Upstairs in the couple's bedroom, police found the bodies. Jerry was fully clothed except for shoes, with a sock stuffed in his mouth. A piece of adhesive tape was clung to his body, which suggested he and Linda were bound. Whatever material the killer used to tie their hands, he removed later. Linda, clad in an unzipped housecoat over a nightgown, appeared to be getting ready for bed. Debbie, wearing a flannel nightgown and 1 red sock. The mate to that sock was on its bed. Jerry's empty wallet lay on the bed. A robbery was considered a possible secondary motive for the murders. Investigators found a bundle of about 15 short lengths of braided hemp rope in the garage the killer may have used to bind Jerry. They were all tied together and were extra tie-downs for canvas Jerry bought to cover a rabbit hutch. The rug was vacuumed and removed for analysis. The police dusted for fingerprints and investigators did a latent fingerprint, but nothing ever came from it. Authorities collected a large box of evidence for examination. It included the victim's clothing, hair samples found at the house, bed sheets, and some bloody towels. Coroner Dr. Frank P. Cleveland performed the autopsies, and Jerry and Linda had head wounds of a penetrative type apparently not made by a knife. Marks were found on the adults' arms, confirming their hands were at some point tied during the ordeal. All 3 victims had been stabbed in their chest and back sometime between 10 p.m. and 6:30 a.m. Jerry had 9 stab wounds, Linda 8, and the killer had raped Linda. Jesus Christ. Debbie had been stabbed 4 times with such force that the knife went all the way through her body. Dr. Cleveland could not determine the sequence of the killings. Detectives traced dates on milk bottle caps and learned that Jerry bought 3.5 gallons from Glenway Avenue Dairy at 8:30 p.m. Sunday, September 25, 1996. Through interviews, police discovered that Linda's father had telephoned her at about 10 p.m. on Sunday to say he and her mother were about to go on vacation. Neighbors Law saw Jerry Bricka between 9 p.m. and 10 p.m. Sunday taking trash cans to the curb for garbage pickup. The next morning at 6:30 a.m., the family did not respond to a call from Jerry's employer, Monsanto Corporation, Addiston. Jerry was supposed to fly to Nitro, West Virginia at 7:05 a.m. with Glenn Ritchie, Monsanto product supervisor, on company business. Rich had called to find out why Jerry wasn't at the airport. Richard Mayer's wife told police she noticed a suspicious man walking back and forth on Greenway Avenue on the Thursday before the murders. She was out in the garage painting tables for the Rathskeller, Richard said. She saw this man walking forth and wondered about him, but she says she couldn't identify his face now. Police suggested the killer used a missing newspaper to wrap and carry the bloody knife out of the Bricka home and possibly threw it away in the garbage bin. All in all, authorities conducted 400 interviews on the investigation. Now, there were several indications that Jerry and Linda knew their killer. For one, there were no signs of forced entry or struggle. However, detectives theorized the killer gained access to the home through the walkout basement entrance door. Debbie was a curious child, so Linda never left out the missing knife in the open. She usually concealed it in one of the drawers. Police thought the killer murdered her because she may have recognized him. The 2 family dogs, Dusty, mostly poodle, and Thumper, a cocker spaniel mix, were known to be aggressive and bark at strangers, yet neighbors did not hear any barking coming from the Bricka home on Sunday night. No sounds were coming from the house at all, as a matter of fact. County police cleared Richard Meyer of involvement in the murders. Although he was never an official suspect, the Meyers received prank phone calls and harassment. The callers accused him of the killings, and when he changed his phone number, they called him at work. However, he always cooperated with the police. At the time of the Bricka family murder, 7 unsolved murders, including the Brickas, occurred over 10 months in the Cincinnati area. I wonder, could it be one person addicted to killing that is doing this? Maybe. Besides the Brickas, there were the murders of 4 women. 3 were raped and strangled. The other fatally stabbed after being ran over by a stolen taxi. Police eventually arrested someone in that case, though. On December 2nd, 1965, 56-year-old Imogen Harrison, wife of a University of Cincinnati space scientist, was found dead in her apartment building's basement. 4 months later, Louise Dant, 58, was found dead. Lois, not Louise, Lois Dant was 58, was found dead in her Price Hill apartment on April 4th, 1966. Deep breath. The third victim, Jeanette M. Messer, 56, and a widow, was found deceased in a city park near the University of Cincinnati campus. Police believed the same killer was responsible and dubbed him the Cincinnati Strangler. They never identified him. Initially, authorities wondered if the Strangler had murdered the Bricka family due to similarities. However, the killer mainly targeted older women, and the police didn't have a person of interest in the Bricka case, so I mean, it works. Here's some potential ideas, like the veterinarian did it. Linda Bricka had worked for Fred Leininger at Glenway Animal Hospital before her murder. There were rumors the two were having an affair, and Leininger killed her and her family when she wanted to break things off. There were also rumors that Jerry had a fling? Nice. Police did not publicly release Leininger's name until years after the murders, but within days of the killings, police interviewed him for about 10 minutes in one session and 45 in another. The latter was tape recorded. The next day, Lieutenant Herbert V. Vogel of the Ohio State Police visited Leininger's wife, Lynn, who told Vogel her husband was upset by the interview and directed him to call their attorney, Richard Moore, with further questions. Vogel called Moore, but Moore had stipulations the authorities had to meet before he would allow them to talk to his client. Initially, the police did not accept the terms. A few months later, in March 1967, police wanted to question Leininger again and were willing to meet Moore's terms, but the lawyers declined the interview. A month earlier, Vogel sent Moore a letter agreeing to Moore's terms, which partly included Moore be present at all times. The Cincinnati Enquirer, definitely a trustworthy source with that name, March 28, 1966 issue reported Vogel also included several questions he wanted to ask Leininger. When did you last see Linda Bricka alive? Did you see Linda Bricka on Thursday, September 22, 1966? When did you last visit the Bricka residence? For what reason did you last visit the Bricka residence? Did Linda Bricka ever discuss with you any of her personal problems? Were you ever out with Linda Bricka socially? Where were you on Sunday night, September 25, 1966, between 9 p.m. and midnight? Moore County Detective Gerald Taylor told that even if he received told in compliance with his terms, he would study it and consider it, but even then, I probably would not allow it. Vogel never received answers to those questions. When Cincinnati Enquirer reported Frank Weichel asked Hamilton County Police what was new with the investigation, police officer told him we're just about living with the suspect. A policeman checks on him from time to time, and he leaves home in the morning and stays nearby until he returns for bed. One of four men even has lunch in the same restaurant where the suspect meets. In his November 10, 1967 column, Weichel wrote the knowledge that police are watching him apparently is having some effect on the suspect. I understand his lunch cocktails are increasing. At first he had one drink, but now he's having 3. Unfortunately, Dr. Fred Leininger never cooperated with the police and worked in his veterinary practice until his retirement in 1995. Most people believe he did it. Some reports vary on this, but apparently, Leininger committed suicide in 2004. It's confusing because they also say his wife, Lynn, committed suicide with him, but their obituaries give different death dates. His obituary states Leininger died on February 23, 2004, while hers said she passed away months later on December 11, 2004. One report only mentions Leininger's supposed suicide, and one only. There's also a little bit about J.T. Townsend, a guy who published a book on this. Alright, that's this entry. Solid. Let's move on. Baltimore City and Howard County Rapist. This is one of the finest instances of place crime format that really threw me for a loop. But here we are on r/unresolved mysteries. Thank you to user deleted 4 months ago for writing this article. I really do love using unresolved communities, or unresolved mysteries articles, and the community is very nice, so big preach to them. Now without further ado, FBI's most wanted, an unidentified sexual predator loose in the Baltimore metropolitan area. Due to the obscurity for this case, the author was only able to find an FBI VCAP article about the serial offender. Between 1994 to 1995, 4 women were sexually assaulted by an unidentified man in Baltimore City and Howard County, Maryland. That state exists still. In August 1994, the Baltimore City Police Department, BCPD, Maryland, investigated the sexual assault of a white woman who was attacked outside in the rear of a dwelling approximately at 3 a.m. On April 5, 1995, the Howard County Police Department, Maryland, investigated the sexual assault of a white woman who was attacked in the parking lot of her apartment complex. This assault occurred also approximately at 3 a.m. Both of the cases, BCPD and HCPD, have been linked by DNA. On April 7th, 1995, 2 white women were attacked in Howard County, Maryland. The victims were attacked outside, with one event at approximately 3 a.m. and the second event at approximately 4:10 a.m. The suspect description and method of operation in these cases are very similar to the 2 previous listed cases above. However, there is no DNA for these cases that could be tied back to a, human being. The unknown suspect had high cheekbones, sunken eyes, crooked teeth, and hair shaved on the sides. He wore a black silk jacket, an aqua button-down dress shirt, black tennis shoes, and baggy blue jeans. He was a black man around 20 to 22 years old, had brown eyes, was 6'0", between 180 and 200 pounds, with black hair. And of course, to this day, there's still not much. One of the commenters did find a few Baltimore Sun articles about the crimes. One specifically is about the April 5th, 1995 assault, and it gives a more precise location, the 9600 block of the Barrel House Road in North Laurel, and also a little more description, including that the victim was grabbed as she exited her car and was then dragged away to a wooded area, and that the rapist's jacket was Starter brand. He was also described as having a muscular build. This April 13th, 1995 article provides a location of the other 2 Howard County attacks. Note that all 3 of the Howard County attacks apparently occurred specifically in North Laurel. It states that police also investigated the possibility that the rapist was involved in an attempted abduction in Columbia, MD, also in Howard County, where a man tried to abduct a 26-year-old woman outside her townhouse and ran away when she screamed and her husband came to help. If the FBI site doesn't mention it, though, the author of this comment assumes they no longer believe there's a question. There is, of course, one last little bit of humor with the rapist's jacket was Starter brand, but it was 1995. Everyone's jacket was Starter. I don't know. I wasn't alive in the 90s. Linthari, you lived in the 90s? Opinions on this? Thanks for sharing your opinions. Let's get to the next one. Larimer County shootings. This one happened in Colorado. You know what else happened in Colorado? You know what happened in Colorado. Don't lie to me. Details, because we are on the FBI website. The Larimer County Sheriff's Office, Colorado, is currently investigating 2 shootings that have occurred in Larimer and Weld counties. These shootings have been linked through forensic evidence. Handgun. 1. On April 22, 2015, at approximately 11:15 p.m., Victim 1 reported that she had been involved in a traffic accident as she was merging onto southbound Interstate 25 from Harmony Road in Larimer County. It was determined later that Miss Romero had been shot in the neck with a firearm while she was driving. Talk about a drive-by. On May 18, 2015, at approximately 10:15 a.m., Victim 2 was shot and killed while riding his bicycle near the intersection of Weld County Road 15 and Weld County Road 72 in Windsor. Interesting. Stay connected and get FBI email alerts? No. Steve's Motel Murders. You know what sounds like a place I'd really like to stay the night? Steve's Motel. That sounds pretty fucking awesome, man. Like, who is Steve? Why does he own a motel? I don't know, but that guy's goals are beyond my understanding. Now, the creator of the Iceberg sent me this article. ABC, not NBC. ABC News 5, Cleveland. Jesus Christ. How can you call yourself a respectable news institution and have a website that looks like this? This isn't even made for computers, it's made for phones. Anyway, by Bob Jones, posted at 5:22 p.m. April 12, 2021. Greene, Ohio. A motel in Greene known for its checkered past. Literally every motel ever is known for its checkered past. Weird shit happens in motels, including a grisly triple murder, that's a new one, has been demolished, clearing the way for a potential new development. Steve's Motel, which opened on East Turkey Foot Lake Road in 1937, was torn down Monday. The city of Greene purchased the property on 1.9 acres last year for the purpose of burning it to the fucking ground. The city is hoping to sell the property to a developer. The motel, which included 20 cabins, an office, and a house, has been a troubled spot over the years. Once again, literally every motel is. Last year, city officials told News 5 that the problems at the motel included deaths and drug overdose. Once again,
Every fucking motel is.
data provided by Greene revealed 27 EMS trips to the motel since 2017. Those are rookie numbers. We need to pump those up. This is a property that for many years has been a drain on city services. Again, every motel is. The most notorious incident at the motel happened in 1991 when the owners, Manhur and Jyoti Patel, along with their 6-year-old daughter Alka, were found killed in the red brick house next to the motel. I was expecting a few prostitutes, so this is a development that I was not expecting. All 3 victims were shot in the head. Captain Scott Cottle from the Summit County Sheriff's Office referred to the killings as a professional hit. It was very cold. The mother and father, one was in the dining room and one was kind of in the area between the kitchen and the dining room. You mean a hallway? Cottle said. The child was in the bed asleep. Very cold-hearted. I mean, at least the kid never saw it coming. Or anything else ever after that. Cottle clearly remembers the high-profile nature of the case because it was his first year as a deputy. I was actually assigned security that night. The first few days they kept security deputies out there, he said. Cottle said the demolition in no way closes this cold case. It just removes the possibility of ever reviewing the crime scene again. Although he doesn't believe any crucial DNA evidence was recovered, there are always possibilities for technological advancements or witnesses coming forward. There's also possibilities that an R32 GTR Skyline by Nissan just kind of pulls up into my driveway and I get the title to it, but it's not very likely. It's about as likely as a new technological advancement or a witness coming forward on this Steve Motel murder case. He said the case was reopened in 2006 thanks to a grant and eventually 2 potential suspects were identified. I may have to eat my words on that last statement about the GTR. One of the suspects has died. Detectives don't have enough evidence to charge the other suspect. Cottle believes one suspect hired the other to commit the murders. If anybody would know anything, we'd obviously want to hear from them. Cottle said, "We would take this as far as we could, and we'd still like to have justice for the family. But they probably won't." Wonton butchery murders. I'm pretty sure my exact words on this entry were, "It sounds like a fucking movie." And sure enough, I couldn't find anything on it. Luckily, I was provided with a Wayback Machine link. So, isn't that interesting? This website is I Did It For Jody. Just another WordPress.com site dedicated to dastardly deeds and detritus. That's some cringe. This archive is from November 7th, 2020. There's another one from January of 2021. Either way, we've got the Wayback Machine, so that's cool. Let's go ahead and read this. God, this screams like 2012. Sun Ye Sunny Kennedy was an unlikely Chinese restaurant owner. First of all, she was not Chinese but Korean, born and bred. Secondly, she did not know how to cook and had no interest in learning. No matter. Sunny's Eatery, the Chinatown restaurant in Bradenton, Florida, was a success, known locally for its generous lunch buffet. Of course this happened in Florida. Of fucking course. Married in 1974, Sunny had immigrated to America 4 years later as a wife of American serviceman Stephen Kennedy. And here's another instance of names being spelt a weird way. Traditionally, this is pronounced as Stephen. But if Stefan's parents wanted me to pronounce it as Stephen, they would have spelt it with a fucking V. So, Stephen Kennedy married Sunny, and they had one child, a son named David. After waiting tables for a few years, Sunny opened the Chinatown restaurant, but her 12-hour, 7-days-a-week schedule put a strain on the Kennedys' marriage. In 1988, the couple divorced and Stephen moved to New York. The split was amicable and the couple shared joint custody of David, though Sunny retained physical custody. She didn't want anything from her husband, no child support, nothing. Her dream was to make her own good living and raise her son, said Teikoku Kirby, Chinatown cashier, to the Tampa Bay Times, January 30th, 1990. Dating as an American divorcee had its share of minefields. One of Sunny's first relationships fell apart due to cultural differences. Her American boyfriend was uncomfortable with her steadfast refusal to look him in the eye and could not abide by her tendency to walk behind him. That guy's a pussy. It looked like her luck was turning around, though. In August of 1989, Sunny met auto mechanic William Earl Plum at the Lounge, a bar abutting the Chinatown restaurant. They headed off and moved in together immediately. That's not a red flag. For the next 6 months, the couple were reportedly quite happy together. And then, wow, holy shit. This has got to be the cheesiest fucking line I've ever seen. A side order of death, no substitution. I can smell the trying too hard from here. The next line is, like yin and yang, beef and broccoli, Chinese restaurants and unsolved homicide go together. I'm about to sneeze because I'm allergic to stupid shit. Jesus Christ. That's a goofy... That's more than goofy. That's just fucking silly. Now, the roots of this phenomena are presumably, according to the author, who I'm starting to question the author here, threefold. Many Chinese restaurants are cash-only, open late night, and most are staffed with immigrants leery of law enforcement. This creates a fertile environment for murder, including the still unsolved slayings with Chinese restaurant ties. Then it goes on to list some Chinese restaurant murders. I don't fucking care, honestly. Now, of course, Sun Yee Kennedy, David Kennedy, and William Earl Plum have their little newspaper clippings here. Uh-oh. At 11 p.m., January 27th, 1990, 42-year-old Sunny, her son, 15-year-old David, and 36-year-old William Plum left the restaurant in Sunny's red van. The next day, Super Bowl XXIV, the restaurant staff found the eatery's door unlocked, but Sunny failed to appear. An unthinkable occurrence. At 2 p.m., officers from the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office were dispatched to the Kennedy residence at 1552 Highcrest Circle in Valrico. They discovered the front door unlocked, and inside found the bloodied bodies of Sunny, David, and William. They had all been shot in the head once with semi-wad cutter bullets, a type of ammunition popular at shooting ranges, because the shell's round noses are designed to pierce paper targets without ripping. We even have another newspaper clipping here. Wow, this website is super cool. I really think this website definitely isn't cringe. The murders did not comprise a single crime scene. Sunny was found in her bedroom closet. William splayed on the floor just outside, and David lay in bed on the other side of the one-story residence. Sunny distrusted night deposit boxes and was known to retain large amounts of cash, sometimes as much as $15K packed into shoe boxes. Jesus Christ, can I get one? An unidentified amount of cash was found at the scene, leading Hillsborough detectives to declare without elaboration robbery was not believed to be a motive for the crime. Confirmed to be present in New York, Stephen was dismissed from suspicion in the slayings, as was a then-teenager named Park. A recent Korean immigrant who worked as a dishwasher at Chinatown restaurant occasionally stayed at the Kennedy residence, and despite the dismissal of these suspects, most who knew Sunny are certain she knew her killer. She was known to be exceedingly security conscious, and had even installed bars and extra locks on the home before she moved in. She would never, under any circumstances, her friends and employees agree, open her door to a stranger. Although known to avoid conflict, there were two recent events in Sunny's life that may have foreshadowed the crime. Shortly before her death, her friend Jean Montagna heard her have a tense phone call in Korean. After she hung up, she asked him to lend her $15,000. He lacked the funds, and she never spoke of the matter again. 4 days before her death, Sunny had a loud argument with a blonde Caucasian man, bespectacled, me trying to pronounce this word is a fucking spectacle. 35 to 40 of average height and build in the restaurant. They spoke in her native Korean. Hillsborough Sheriff's deputies created a composite of the person of interest, but the identikit image, Jesus Christ,
I promise I know how to speak English.
was never published in the Tampa Bay Times. Several elements of the Kennedy Plum murders gnaw at the author. David Kennedy, 15 years old, loved martial arts, Dungeons and Dragons, and dreamed of going to art school. A prototypical geek. One of us, the author says.
Not rocking with the vibes.
William Plum, law-abiding, sure. Genial, dead because he fell in love with the wrong woman at a strip mall watering hole. There's no aspirations on law enforcement, but it is baffling that the Hillsborough Sheriff's Office failed to identify the Caucasian dude who argued with Sonny at the restaurant. The author of this article clearly has not dipped their toes, their ass cheeks, or any part of their body into the pool of unsolved true crime. Because I can say as a bona fide fucking armchair expert that police cannot do shit sometimes. Either they do great in like the first 2 days and boom, it's solved because the criminal was stupid, or it's just never fucking solved, and the police, at every single step of the way, manage to baffle you with their continued idiocy. So, yeah, the author is very clearly still naive, and not nearly as jaded as me. In mid-century America, Korean wasn't taught as a high school elective, so this guy almost certainly had missionary or military ties. It'd be shocking if he also didn't have a Korean wife. Now, of course, above all in these decidedly anti-immigrant times, that was relevant in 2012, still relevant now. Thoughts of Sonny Kennedy coming all the way from Korea to make a new life, working so hard, being so careful, getting fucking murdered is kind of depressing. Oh, but they also have the murder scene, present day. Isn't that cool? Is that a fucking Chevy in the driveway? That's disgusting. Hendersonville, North Carolina Murders, which takes us to the Unsolved Mysteries wiki of Vernon Shipman, Charles Glass, and Louise Shutmate. On July 17, 1966, gay partners Vernon Shipman and Charles Glass, we love gay men, vanished from Hendersonville, North Carolina. We do not love that. 5 days later, two workers dumping brush in an isolated clearing found their bodies along with that of a woman, all beaten severely and stabbed. A few days later, the woman was identified as Louise Shutmate. Police were puzzled because neither Vernon nor Charles apparently knew Louise, nor did most people in Hendersonville, because she lived in a town miles away. Authorities found on July 17th that all three victims were seen driving in Vernon's car with an unidentified fourth person, and to this day the identity of the fourth person remains unknown. Along with how Vernon and Charles are connected to Louise and who killed them. Police believe that the murders may be connected to the fact that Vernon and Charles were homosexual, or that the murders may be drug-related, but none of these theories have been confirmed. At the time, news reports did not indicate the sexual orientation of either of them, just reporting that they co-owned the Tempo music store, and it described Charles as favoring the Asian lifestyle. Proto-weeaboo in 1966? Yikes. He was found with a pair of crutches crossed over his torso. He had broken a leg at the time, and reports in the Henderson Times News stated he was not a fighter. There is extra notes, which is this case has appeared in the show Haunting Evidence. That definitely sounds like a reputable show. Totally. And as for the results, completely unresolved. In 2007, several investigators that have worked in the case stated that they believed the case was practically solved. Circumstantial evidence linked the triple murder to convicted murderer Edward Thompson Jr., who died in prison in '89. Thompson had escaped from prison shortly before the murders and was in Hendersonville on July 17, 1966. However, the case has not been officially closed, and we will never know for sure. As I descend further into madness, thanks to Eminem for getting me through this shit, so let's go on. We are at the Calgary sex worker killer. Now, I could read all of these women's names off, but this website is just so fucking wide that I will not. Let's get into the 1993 investigation of the Calgary sex worker killer. In a span of 19 months, 5 women were murdered. 4 of them had confirmed links to the sex trade. According to a May 1999 Calgary Sun article, after the number of Rebecca Boultier, 6 years passed away without a murder of a sex worker in Calgary. In 1993, the Calgary Task Force traveled to Edmonton for a serial killer psychological profile meeting with top FBI profilers. Here's another heartbreaking thing to learn. Profiling is basically just fucking astrology for dudes in the FBI. It's not based on much. Now, let's get into that further. They examined possible links between 15 murders, including those of Jennifer Jans, Jennifer Joyce, and Keely Pinkat. It's unclear if they examined the murders of Rebecca Boultier and Tracy Meander, and the details of their findings were not released. Throughout the 90s, across Western Canada, violent attacks against women from all walks of life continued. This is because, believe it or not, at any given time, there is probably a violent attack against women happening. Shit's rough out there for women. I am so sorry that that's how society is. We live in a society. Bottom text. Carrying on. The murder of Shauna Vonderbush in June 1991, before Jennifer Jans, was just one of those cases. But there is a pattern. Between 1991 and 1995, at least 56 sex trade workers were killed while working on the streets in Canada. 8 of these women were from Alberta. By 2000, the pattern was impossible to ignore. In 2003, the year that your favorite YouTuber, me, was born, after examining 82 seemingly similar unsolved cases in Western Canada, the RCMP deployed Project CARE to investigate the serial murders and disappearances of vulnerable persons, prostitutes, focusing on the cases in the Edmonton-Calgary area. A grossly disproportionate number of these cases involved Indigenous women. Why? Because the cops do not care about Indigenous people or prostitutes, and Indigenous prostitutes, the cops really don't care about those. Far too many of these murders, including the cases in Calgary, remain unsolved. That's how most murders go. On the suspect. One possible suspect investigated in the Calgary murders was a Lethbridge pimp named Barry Thomas Niedermeier. In 1990, Niedermeier was convicted of trafficking a 14-year-old girl in BC who he had met in Calgary. Jesus Christ. I hope that guy had the whole broomstick shoved up his ass. When investigators rescued the girl and finally interviewed her, she was so terrified that she requested the stuffed animal she kept for comfort during her captivity. Investigators returned to the hotel room where she'd been kept to get it for her, and for this heinous crime, Niedermeier served just 14 months in jail. Wow. In 2000, he was charged with 14 offenses against 7 Vancouver sex trade workers, but no evidence was found to link him to the murders in Calgary. On sex workers and serial violence. According to the 2011 report by the Sister Watch Project of the Vancouver Police Department and the Women's Memorial March Committee on Missing and Murdered Aboriginal Women in Canada, holy shit, that is a fucking mouthful. The murder risk for sex trade workers is approximately 60 to 100 times that of the general female population, which is already elevated due to the fact that they are female. Some research suggests that sex workers are the most likely victims of a serial killer, and the reporter also states the most highly addicted and desperate sex trade workers are more likely than other sex trade workers to be the victims of a serial killer. And of course, there is still no justice. Jennifer Jans and Rebecca Boultier never knew each other, but their brief lives collided on the streets of Calgary. Whatever lifestyle they and other victims may have led is ultimately irrelevant. The value of a life never changes, and the murder of someone who works as a sex worker is as heinous and as heartbreaking as any. They were loved and deserved to live, which is why murder is a truly heartbreaking thing, and it's really rough to surround yourself with that constantly. Suspects have been questioned and various leads have been pursued, yet there has been no justice for these women. 30 years have passed since the murders began. Investigators believe the same individual is responsible for the murder of Jennifer Jans and Rebecca Boultier, as well as the other women in Calgary who are doing their best to survive. There is no closure, there is no happy ending, but what there is at the end of this article is a Canadian human trafficking hotline. Not very many of my viewers are in Canada, but if you are, and if you are a victim or survivor of forced prostitution or forced sex labor, or believe someone else might be, call the phone number on screen now. The Smith Family Murders. Here we are on another website. That's a very strong word for it. So, we are at the Birmingham Mail. That's definitely a reputable source for sure. We have the article, devoted couple tied up, tortured, and murdered, along with disabled son. Killers still at large, despite police turning to Silence of the Lambs psychologist. Because, hey, you know, that guy was in a movie. Surely he can solve any crime. Definitely. Enter your postcode for local news and info? No. Now, let's get into the article. The police have issued a fresh appeal for help to solve one of Birmingham's most notorious crimes, the brutal triple murder of a couple and their disabled son. The appeal was issued on Saturday, exactly 25 years since the bodies of Harold and Mary Smith and their paralyzed son Harold Jr. were found at their home in Overbury, close to Northfield. They had been bound and repeatedly stabbed before they were killed. Yikes. The family's grim fate was discovered on December 2nd, 1992 by police who forced their way in after their daughter raised the alarm when she hadn't heard from them in a few days. The police came into a blood-spattered bedroom. Oh. Mr. Smith, a 72-year-old former car worker, was lying on the floor, hands bound up in a tie. He'd been stabbed about 100 times, not really that many times. He definitely could have survived that, totally. Some of the wounds possibly inflicted as he tried to protect his family. His wife was found lying on her back on the bed, and their 47-year-old son, Harold Jr., who had been paralyzed in a road accident years before, was slumped in his wheelchair, gagged with a sock and bound with a dressing gown belt. Interesting methods here, huh, Britain? The killer or killers also are believed to have beaten them around the head, because, you know, what is a little bit of murder without torture beforehand? A post-mortem examination revealed the murder weapons were most likely a small kitchen knife with a 5-inch long blade and a wooden stave or club. The murders have never been found, and the motive remains a mystery, as nothing appeared to have been stolen. The family were well known in the area, and Mr. Smith was a familiar face in Northfield's Traveller's Rest pub with his trademark white cap. His wife, Mary, also 72, was devoted to Harold Jr., who had been paralyzed 12 years earlier in a car accident, because car safety was totally a thing back in these times. Their bungalow had been adapted to accommodate his wheelchair. 30 detectives were drafted into the massive hunt for the killer, because not much is happening in Britain, so this was pretty important. Police divers were called in to scour open land and waterways near Hole Lane, Northfield, half a mile from the murder scene, in the hope of turning up something relevant to the killings. Within weeks of the bloodbath, a psychologist was drafted in to piece together a profile of the maniac, referred to at the time as a Silence of the Lambs style profile after the Hollywood movie hit the screens a year before. Criminal psychologist Paul Britton concluded that the killer enjoyed carrying out the murders and could strike again if not caught. You're fucking kidding.
I could have put that together, asshole.
Yes, he said an examination of the evidence revealed the offenders to be aged between 14 and 25 with the knowledge of Northfield. These people who did this came to enjoy what they did. In the year after the killing, officers interviewed 1,652 people, checked 340 vehicles, took 350 written statements, and followed up on 1,400 lines of inquiry. Detective, whatever that is short for, Detective Inspector, yeah. Ian Ilife, however you say that, from West Midlands Police Cold Case Review Team said, as a part of our continual review of unsolved crimes, we are taking the opportunity of the 25th anniversary of this most horrific case to appeal to anyone who has kept information they may hold secret for all of these years to come forward. I can't accept the person who is responsible for this has kept this secret all their life. It's pretty easy to keep a secret your entire life. It's called don't fucking talk about it. I believe that they would have shared what they did with someone else, maybe a family member or a friend. Nope. If you were that person, please come forward. And, spoiler alert, they didn't. The case is still unsolved. As part of the case review, the team will also be looking at forensic opportunities in the light of advances in science. Detective Inspector Ilife added, there's been massive advances in DNA technology, and we will be reviewing all the evidence we hold from 1992 to see if it sheds any new lights on lines of inquiry. Anyone with information should call the review team on 101 or Crime Stoppers in confidence on 0800 555 111. Yep, that's right. Tragic case, still unsolved. Yep, you already know it. They managed to mention 1992, and I did not bring up the R32 GTR Skyline, which you could purchase at that year. So I will consider this as a dub for me, except for the part where, you know, that horrible murder happened. Next entry. Paris, Texas shootings. Despite listening to upbeat Eurobeat music, I feel completely dead inside. Someone kill me. Paris, Texas is an interesting name, mostly because why would we name something after Surrenderland in good old Big Dick Syndrome, Texas, constantly compensating for actually being the second largest state in America. Alaska does everything better than you, Texas, including the STD rate. Anyway, let's get into the Paris Quad murder. On October 9th, 2013, 4 men were murdered shortly before 11 p.m. in a house located at 435 Northeast 6th Street, and 6 years later, their murders remain unsolved, just like, I think, 2/3 of all murders do. 1/3? I can't remember the exact number. Lindari! Put the number on screen. What percentage of murders remain unsolved? Thank you. This was a pretty violent situation. I've been an officer here for 39 years, and I can't recall any multiple homicides that we've had, said Paris Police Chief Bob Hundley, as he told CBS DFW on October 10th, 2013. Keep in mind, this murder was almost 10 years ago. Isn't that crazy? Romello Duane Stewart, 18, of Paris. Devontae Larry Atkins, 21, of Paris. Brijan? I hope I'm saying that right. Rashad Woods, 24, of Paris, and Billy Charles Carey, 32, of Garland, were all found in the front room of the house with gunshot wounds. According to Chief Hundley, a female called shortly before 11:30 p.m. to report that someone was bleeding at a home on the 400 block of Northeast 6th Street. When authorities arrived at the scene, 4 victims were found dead towards the front of the home, all with gunshot wounds. The female 911 caller had come by the house to visit one of the dudes who was, now you know, fucking bleeding out. Someone knows the identity of the person or persons who committed this murder, said Executive Director of Lamar Red River Crime Stoppers, William Buddy Huberger. If you have any information about these murders, no matter how trivial you think it is, contact Crime Stoppers. The information just might be the missing piece of the puzzle that leads law enforcement to those responsible. I have some information that you're missing. This crime probably won't be solved. It's almost been a decade. Those with information can contact Crime Stoppers and remain anonymous if they wish. If the anonymous information you provide leads to an arrest and/or indictment of the person or persons responsible, you become eligible for cash reward up to $2,500, because what better way to solve crime than to simply buy your way out of it? That's right, skip all the work. Pay people. That's kind of the premise of the economy. I feel like my joke has now backfired. Carrying on, words cannot express how grateful we would be if someone would come forward with some information, said Chief Hundley. We really need someone to come forward with information and get this quad murder solved. I'm so sorry to say it, but it probably won't be. Crime Stoppers is a non-profit organization and is operated by an independent board of directors. Crime Stoppers is not part of any law enforcement agency, and the rest of this article is a Crime Stoppers ad. You can call them using the phone number on screen right here, or go to their email, or go to their mobile app. If you're interested, and if you have actual information about the case, which, you know, a lot of people watch my channel, but I don't think any of them have any specific information on this. So, yeah, let's go on to the next entry. East Cleveland shooting. No, not Cleveland like the funny Family Man guy. I mean Cleveland like the city where someone just got fucking shot. And this article is especially depressing because mother of young woman killed in Cleveland quadruple murder doesn't want the case to go cold. I don't think anyone affected by murder does want the case to be cold. But sometimes it just happens. Now, this article is from February 6th, 2020. That's how you know the article was written while the entire world was descended into hell, so this ought to be a fun one. Cleveland, Ohio. W-O-I-O? What the fuck is that supposed to mean? The murders of 4 young adults whose bodies were found in a vacant home on Cleveland's east side remains unsolved. The families of 19-year-old Ayanna Quitman Yes. 20-year-old Dijon Willis, 23-year-old Christopher Monroe, and 18-year-old Jasmine Lawson are grieving. They're also yearning for information that will help the police catch a killer or killers. The police discovered the bodies on September 21st, 2019 in Cleveland's Mount Pleasant neighborhood. An odor from 3616 East 144th Street got police to the scene. It took the medical examiner's office several days to identify the remains, partly because they were, really fucking decomposed, and each had been shot multiple times. Lawson's mother, Christina Britton, spoke to 19 News about the unsolved case. How do you just walk into a house and shoot and kill 4 people? Easy, you be a real fucking degenerate. And walk out leaving them away to rot like garbage, and you just go on with your life like you never did anything. Easy, you be a real fucking degenerate. Britton said one of the biggest things she misses about her daughter is her smile. That is a horrendous pain. I truly cannot even imagine the hurt of losing a child. And I am... Whew, that one's getting to me. Can't act jaded and sarcastic about that. That's actually sad. Lawson loved her 7 siblings and had a passion for music. Every notebook in there, she's got songs wrote down in it. Different songs that she liked, Britton said. Britton has spent the last 4 months searching for answers. There's been a lot of mothers contacting me on Facebook because their children have been murdered here in Cleveland and they have no answers. It's not a good way to meet people. It's not, Britton was quoted as saying. She and others in the community have dedicated time and resources to helping police crack the case, including plastering pamphlets in the community asking for tips. A $10,000 reward was being offered at the time of this article being written by Crime Stoppers of Cuyahoga County for information about the case, and tips can be made anonymously by calling the phone number on screen there. The home where the murders happened was demolished in December of 2019 by the Cuyahoga County Land Bank, which is very nice, destroy the crime scene. That definitely will not make the investigation harder. Early in the investigation, police said a gun was found next to the bodies inside the home. 19 News asked recently if the gun was registered. A department spokesperson said they couldn't comment due to the nature of the ongoing investigation. There's constantly a war going between the media and police when crimes like this happen, because if the police accidentally let something slip up that, triggers the killer's gonna get spooked, and that's gonna make the investigation either a lot easier, but most of the time a lot harder. But for whatever reason, news establishments are kind of narcissists and are like, give me the news anyways. So, yeah, that's a fun thing. Police have also not given a motive. We do have a dedicated team of investigators that are still working on this case, said Cleveland Division of Police spokesperson Sergeant Jennifer Siakia? There's so many different pronunciations. Just pick one. It's one of those things where they haven't had an arrest yet, but that doesn't mean there's not progress in the case. We are still encouraging the public and anyone who does have information to call in and give our investigators what they need to close this case. Lawson was dating Monroe, one of the other victims. Monroe's sister told 19 News her brother was known to sell drugs and had did it out at the very house where the murders happened. I wonder why that crime happened. Britton said she didn't know Monroe well. Nonetheless, she said no matter the circumstances, her daughter and the other victims deserve justice. That is absolutely correct, and I'm tired of pretending it's not. There's this bad habit when a crime happens, especially against minorities, where suddenly everyone wants to bring up their past. Someone got shot wrongfully by the police? Well, it doesn't matter. They had a criminal record. No, shut the fuck up. Someone's past does not affect the type of justice they deserve. Especially when they were innocently killed. Now, if they were not innocently killed, then, oh well, their past does play a role in it. But when some 19-year-old kids are just fucking killed, you can't be like, but he was doing to me, and then not solve the crime. That just makes you a dipshit. You destroyed 4 families. That's what they did, Britton said. They took from 4 families that will never ever be the same, was Britton's last quote before the article ended. So, yeah, that's nice. Also, very conveniently, we have yet to have whipped out the lingerie ad counter yet. At least in this recording session. I make these videos in like 3 separate recording sessions where I record all the clips. So while I've been recording today, I have yet to see a lingerie ad. Isn't that nice? The Trofimov beheadings. Now, this Wikipedia article is actually in Ukrainian, so thanks to Google Translate for translating that. Also remember, if you can support the Ukrainian armed forces or the Ukrainian people, absolutely do that. Slava Ukraini, and their cause is a lot more important than mine, so if you aren't mindful and aware of that, go ahead and take some time to learn about that, because it is very important. Now, this Wikipedia article, thank God for Wikipedia, I am once again asking you to financially support Wikipedia, is titled The Murder of a Kharkiv Judge. The murder of a Kharkiv judge is a common name in the media of the premeditated murder of a judge of the Fruzensky District Court of Kharkiv, Vladimir Trofimov, and members of his family, which took place on December 15, 2012 in Kharkiv, one of the most brutal and resonant crimes in the recent history of Ukraine, excluding, the
Literal war crimes.
Now, those killed in this crime were Trofimov Vladimir Syryovich, judge, former chairman of the Fruzensky District Court of Kharkiv, 58 years old, Trofimova Irina Kostaninova, his wife, pensioner, 59 years old, and Trofimov Sergei Vladimirovich, oh my god, that's a tongue twister, their son, web designer, 30 years old, and of course, number 4, Zueva Maria Irvona is the civil wife of her son. She worked as a junior researcher at the Research Institute of Dermatology and Venerology at the Academy of the Medical Sciences of Ukraine, 28 years old. The circumstances of the crime: the decapitated bodies of the judge, his wife, son, and civilian wife were found on Saturday, December 15, 2012, in the apartment of a multi-story residential building located in the Moscow district of Kharkiv, the Moskovy Project 85, where the victims lived. No traces of burglary were found on the door. The time of the crime is from about 8 to 13 hours, so from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. The killers may have entered the apartment after the judge walked the dog. Sorry, Google Translate threw me off a little bit there. The judge's adopted son, 40-year-old Valery Zaharvensky, visited the apartment, worried that no one was answering the phone, and called the police at 1:02 p.m. It turned out that the heads of all the victims were absent at the crime scene. That's only a little bit important. You only kind of need your head to keep living. It was later established that the son of the murdered judge had been beheaded while still alive. The other victims died of gunshot wounds to the head, and they were beheaded after biological death with a very sharp object. Thank you, Google. I would have never known that a very sharp object was needed to behead someone. The killer may have brought this object with him. Again, I'm going to chalk that up to Translate being a little goofy. The killer definitely brought the object with him. Now, Maria Zueva's palm was shot as if she was trying to protect herself from being shot with her hand, so self-defense wounds, and somehow the neighbors did not hear anything. There's also something about December 15th being Professional Holiday Court of Employees. Weird. Now, after finding the bodies, the criminal proceedings were opened on the grounds of Paragraph 1, Part 2 of Article 115 of the Criminal Code of Ukraine, intentional murder of 2 or more persons. An investigative task force has been set up with the participation of police, prosecutors, and the security service. On December 16th, Prosecutor General of Ukraine Viktor Pashonka, Minister of the Internal Affairs Vitaly Zarchenko, and Head of Security Service of Ukraine Ihor Kalinin arrived in Kharkiv. More than 30 examinations were appointed, in particular forensic, immunological, and others. That's a lot of forensic, Google Translate. According to the first information that was found, the attackers were preparing to commit a crime in advance, so they ran with that. On December 17th, the main directorate of the Ministry of Internal Affairs in Kharkiv Oblast announced a reward of UAH, I'm going to presume that is the currency in Ukraine, 200,000 for providing reliable information that would help solve the crime. On February 5th, 2013, information appeared that 18,000 witnesses were interrogated in the case, and 526 of these were assigned examinations. On February 25th, MP Hanidari Maiskal, I don't think I said that, said that right. Jesus Christ, I know how to speak. Stated the investigation into the murder of the family of the Kharkiv judge Vladimir Trofimov had reached a dead end. Subsequently, law enforcement officials criticized this view. According to my information, now the investigation into this murder has reached a stalemate. There are no real conclusions. G. Moskal. Gennady Moskal is a police general, so due to his professionalism, he has no right to talk about the investigative impasse. There can be no dead end. The investigation is always under investigation. V. Pashonka, absolute Giga Chad. On February 27th, Interior Minister Vitaly Zarchenko released information that some of the victims' belongings had been found in the Donetsk region. On February 28th, 2013, according to the head of the main investigation department of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, Vasil Ferenc, drug traffickers were detained who paid for the goods with coins from the collection of the murdered. March 7th, law enforcement officers detain a person likely involved in the case, and he is also conveniently a resident of the Donetsk region. Due to mistakes on April 17th, the investigative task force working on the case was renewed. The head of the Interior Ministry in Kharkiv region admitted that there were some things, a number of points, which unfortunately were not paid attention to. Police are gonna police. They're gonna always do the shit that police do. Doesn't matter the country. God damn it. October 25th, more than 40,000 people are interrogated as part of the investigation, and nearly 800 examinations are conducted, and the criminal proceedings number about 500. Investigators are also viewing video from more than 60 surveillance cameras and conducted nearly 60 searches. On November 22nd, a gang detaining about 1,500 precious coins was captured in the Kharkiv Oblast. According to police, these coins may be from a collection of Trofimov. In October 2014, law enforcement officers last reported on the progress of the pre-trial investigation. According to the prosecutor of the Kharkiv region, the killers were not found and there is no positive results. Only in September 2018, new information from the Ministry of Internal Affairs appeared. First Deputy Chief of the National Police, Vyacheslav Abroskin, stated that law enforcement officers went abroad and talked there with some detainees who may be involved in crimes. Jesus Christ, that was a struggle. Now, there are different versions of the crime and how it went. I feel like versions might be a little goof, a little gab. I have no clue what that is supposed to mean. I'm just going to keep reading it. Professional activity may be related when a person is performing a certain official duty, is killed in order to prevent or stop such activity to change its nature, or on the grounds of revenge for it. So the professional activity of the judge is one reason. Judges do have a little bit of power, and they can make some decisions that some people don't like, which often leads to, murder. The first version did not find strong arguments for its veracity. Vladimir Trofimov is a second-generation judge. He worked as a chairman of the Fruzensky District Court of Kharkiv for 20 years, and for the last 10 years before his murder as a simple judge. Trofimov was private and, according to colleagues, led a rather modest life. He did not have his own car. He came to work by public transport. He was described as soft and non-confrontational, and there were no complaints against him in the High Council of Justice. The murder judge was described as an old-school lawyer. I'm hoping that does not mean very racist. A professional who, however, did not conduct high-profile cases. Now, this is a huge one. He did not conduct high-profile cases, so there is not going to be a very valid reason to, fucking murder him and his family. However, he had access to state secret number 1, considered special secrecy cases in which participants were special services and gave permission to interrogate officials. In total, since 2007, Trofimov has passed more than 3,000 court decisions in the Fruzensky District Court, and the judge held his last hearing on December 12th, considering a lawsuit for child support. Over the past month, Trofimov has also heard cases involving property issues, divorces, and petty thefts. Now, there is, of course, also the motive of theft, seizure of property of the victim. Intentional homicide for selfish motives is carried out in order to obtain any material benefits for oneself or others, to seize money, jewelry, securities, property, etc., or to achieve other material gain. Now, this second iteration is more successful. Trofimov was a professional collector. He inherited in the collection of porcelain, ancient coins dating from 1690 to 1917, orders, medals, paintings, and other things from his father, also a judge. He bought most of the money from the sale of a home in the Donetsk region. Trofimov also spent his money on the business of his life collecting. There were legends about Trofimov's collection. It was the largest in the CIS. Part of this collection, of course, disappeared after the murder. Isn't that fun? Now, this version is contradicted by the fact that Trofimov almost certainly did not keep such a powerful collection at home, even though some of it was missing. Before the Revolution of Dignity, I have no clue what that is, political and social changes in Ukraine from November 30th, 2013 to February 2014 caused by the protest of Ukrainian citizens against the illegal dispersion of peaceful action of students and the civic activists, which began November 21st, 2013 as a resistance against the departure of some of the items in the collection were not stolen by the murders and were kept in the building of the Kharkiv Department of Internal Affairs, now the Regional Department for the National Police. Their further fate is unknown. There's also the idea that it was contract killings or religious rite. Neither of these hold up, and ultimately, unfortunately, the Kharkiv tragedy, while sparking a lot of shock reactions in the media as one of the loudest, scary, and brutal crimes to have happened in Ukraine before the war crimes, there is still no leads, and given the fact that there's, a literal fucking war happening, it's not very likely that there will be leads. Hindley Walk Stranglings. We are very close to the end of this video, which is why we're back to another half-right wannabe British news site, full of Sweetwater ads because of that one time I bought FL Studio. A pregnant mom's strangled body lay in her home as a fire killed her sons. Why has nobody ever been brought to justice? Easy peasy, because the justice system all around the world, almost any justice system you can think of, is wildly inefficient. It's like a college frat dude who's shit-faced drunk trying to find the clit. He just will not find it. He will instead wind up going for something completely different and insisting that yes, in fact, his extremely disappointed partner did orgasm, and that he did not last only 30 seconds. Now, when Tracy Smith was 7 years old, a fire ripped through her home while her pregnant mother and 5 siblings were still inside. Tracy and 3 of her brothers managed to escape from a bedroom window with the help of firefighters, but Mum and her twin brothers, fucking burnt to death. It would later emerge that while toddlers Mark and Leslie died of smoke inhalation, her mom, Mary Budworth, had also died from shock and strangulation. More than 30 years after Mary's death, alongside her infant sons, shook Liverpool, no one has ever been brought to justice. Surprise, surprise. Tracy is desperately reappealing for any new information that could help Maryside police to finally close the investigation on her mother's death. Many of the details of what happened that night or the immediate aftermath are vague in Tracy's mind. She was only 7 at the time and suffered significant emotional and mental trauma from the ordeal because, believe it or not, having a house catch on fire is pretty fucking traumatizing. I did have that happen to me once. Furnace caught on fire. We had to bail out of the house and wait for the firefighters to arrive. It was very depressing. Just kind of waiting there as smoke spewed out of your house and all your shit got ruined, and then the firefighters came through and just fucking obliterated everything with a high-pressure hose. Having a house burned down is not fun. I could not imagine losing someone from it. Now, she knows her mom was in her early 30s when she died and that she was around 20 weeks pregnant with a baby boy. Uh-oh, late-term abortion. What she knows for certain is that in the early hours of April 22nd, 1985, a fire ripped through her home at 9 Hindley Walk and Speak. Speaking to the Echo about the anniversary of the fire that killed her mom and siblings, Tracy said her memories of that night are patchy. Trauma will do that. She remembers her stepbrother Lee, who was 11 at the time, running upstairs shouting, "Fire! Fire! Fire!" Tracy, now 41, said, "I was awake already. I heard the noises downstairs, just like rustling papers and that in the living room. They never told us what the cause of the fire was. It could have been a naked flame." She recalls that the children moved bedrooms the night of the fire and that she and her brother Dean had to climb out of a bedroom to escape the flames. She said, "We got helped out of the house by firefighters and we were taken to the hospital and the neighbors took us in until the ambulance came." Tracy, who is 7, escaped along with her brother Dean, 4, Craig 2, and stepbrother Lee, 11. But their pregnant mother, Mary, and toddlers Leslie and Mark died. That's one question that keeps coming to the forefront of her mind when thinking of why her mom was found with strangulation marks and why no one was ever brought to justice. Notes from the investigation given by police to Tracy, whose maiden name was Tracy Budworth, were shared with the Echo for a previous report. They show extensive witness statements were taken in the weeks following the 1985 blaze, but no one was ever found guilty of causing the death. The papers include statements heard at the inquest into the deaths, with which a slow pathologist concluded Tracy's siblings had died of smoke inhalation, but that her mother, Mary Budworth, had died from shock and strangulation as well as smoke inhalation. Maryside police told the Echo they carry out regular reviews of cold cases and that there was a comprehensive review of this case in recent years. Detective Superintendent John Webster said, "This was a tragic case which continues to have a massive impact on Tracy and her siblings. No shit, Sherlock. Our investigation remains open." Yeah, sure. "And we will continue to carry out regular reviews. I want to emphasize that no serious investigation is ever closed. If any new evidence comes to light, we will take the appropriate action and try to bring some form of closure to Mary's family after all these years. One thing that remains clear is the lasting impact this tragedy had on the children who survived it, and were ultimately torn apart in its aftermath." Tracy was placed in a separate foster home to some of her siblings, and she lost contact with her brothers for some times. Even now, she doesn't know where Dean is, and only recently managed to re-establish contact with Craig. All Tracy can hope is that someone, somewhere, holds the information that may finally help her in getting justice for her mother, which ultimately may be a completely futile cause. Again, the justice system is wildly inefficient. The Brightmoor family murders. We're back on the Wayback Machine. No wonder I couldn't find the proof for this one. This is from the World News, Great Britain. This is definitely a trustworthy news page. Anniversary of a devastating Sheffield arson attack which killed 3 approaches. The anniversary of a devastating arson attack which killed 3 members of the same family 13 years ago is approaching. This was in 12/5/2018, so it's actually been 18 years now. Wait, hold on. 17. Yeah. Anthony Brightmoor, aged 68, perished with his wife Patricia, 65, and their blind son, Stephen. Again, I've said it. If they wanted me to pronounce it Stephen, they would have spelt it with a fucking V. So, Stephen, 35, after a fire in their home in Baltimore in the early hours of December 23rd, 2005, back when I was still shitting my pants. Now, the alleged killer, a vulnerable Sheffield man, left a 3-mile-long trail of blood. Court told a 15-year-old boy later went on trial accused of manslaughter, but was found not guilty and the case was closed, with detectives announcing that they were not looking for anyone else in connection with the fatal arson attack. You know, this is very interesting writing style. The Brightmoor family home on Baltimore Walk went up in flames after a plastic wheelie bin was set alight outside the front door. That's how I know this crime happened in Britain. Wheelie bin? Wheelie bin? What fucking news source would use the word wheelie but Britain? You guys speak like fucking Elvish English. Just fucking comical, whimsical, light, childish even. Goddamn you, Britain. So naive. Now, flames from the bin spread to the 2-story mansionette and quickly engulfed the property. Mansionette? What kind of British fucking nonsense? Mr. and Mrs. Brightmoor died in their home, but Stephen initially survived, although the extent of his burns was so severe that he lost his fight for life 2 days later. The boy accused of starting the fire was a self-confessed teenage arsonist who jurors heard found it funny to set fire to paper, pens, and plastic bottles, usually in woodland. And what exactly made them... What? He died setting fire to the wheelie bin, claiming a teenage friend had been lying when he said he saw him set fire to a crisp packet and drop it into the bin outside the family's home. He admitted that he had been roaming the streets of Baltimore and Jordanthorpe, climbing on roofs and smoking cannabis with his brother. Marijuana? Oh no! The entire fucking nation is at risk! That's the most dangerous substance in the world! God, what kind of fucking... Oh no, he was smoking weed. Surely he murdered an entire family. Fuck off. Now, he had been smoking weed with his brother and teenage girl, like, you know, people do, on the night of the blaze, but denied responsibility. The murders are among 33 unsolved cases on South Yorkshire's police books. There's also football news for whatever reason. Do you mean soccer news? Either way, I don't give a shit. And that does it. We've finished the Ultimate True Crimes Iceberg Explained Lost level. There is now only one more level and this behemoth, and then we are done. Isn't that crazy to think about? I know, that is insane to think about. All of these months, and it's finally done. Just one more video, and it's over. Now, if you're new here, because a lot of new people do click on these videos, go ahead and just subscribe. It's completely free. It helps me pursue my dreams. And if you wind up hating my fucking guts later, you can always undo it. But regardless, you made it to this point in the video, so I'm clearly mildly entertaining. Go ahead and just press that button. If you're not new here, you're already subscribed, and you want to support the channel more, you can go ahead and support me on Patreon. Now here's the part where I shout out the patrons currently as I'm recording this video. To AJ, thank you so much for your subscription. It really does mean the world to me. Patreon is kind of how I, afford gas to get to my job that pays me, because as much as I'd love to do YouTube for a living, I am just not paid for it yet. But you could fix that by subscribing or subscribing to my Patreon today, if you want to. If you can't or you don't want to, no hard feelings. Once again, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening to me ramble. Thank you so much for everything. Until next time, have a great time. Memento mori.